Good, thank you. So first, thank you so much for having me here. And I apologize, I was the one pounding the Red Bull in the back because I just got back from Hawaii, all business, so it wasn't pleasure. And then I had a huge NSF proposal due yesterday, which I'll talk a little bit about, and then I got on a plane last night. So my body actually doesn't know what time zone it's in at the moment. So bear with me, but thank you so much. As Keith said, I am the Director of Health Analytics now. I was the Director of Visualization, so you didn't misremember things. I was for about 16 years. I got the opportunity to actually do a joint appointment and join the faculty at the med school. And those of you who know me at all know that health is a personal passion of mine, in addition to sort of broadening participation. So I jumped at the chance to go onto the faculty, working on problems like maternal mortality, morbidity, child mortality, all the things that you thought were solved in this great nation that are indeed still problems. And I am, part of that informs what I'm going to talk about today. So I grew up in a very small town in rural Arkansas. I didn't have to walk uphill to school both ways. That was my dad. I was in a strong educational family. My father had a nuclear physics degree, so that of course meant that I was going to go nowhere near nuclear physics, just as my children are going nowhere near computer science, even with all the work I do in outreach. But it was tough in the 80s being a woman, and if you just look around the room, and don't get me wrong, gentlemen, some of my favorite people are men. I'm married to one, I have a son. They happen to both be white guys, so some of my favorite people are white guys. But we got a problem, and we got to be able to talk about it. And so I know that a lot of you guys are from corporate America, so I thought it would be prudent for me to put some slides up about why this is all of our problem. So you've heard it, in a number of different ways, and it's a very politically charged climate to actually sort of talk about this. But what we are projected to be by 2040 is a majority-minority country, meaning that all of the groups that we consider to be racial and ethnic minorities are actually, in aggregate, going to be the majority. And white people, Caucasians, are going to be in the minority. That's not a bad thing. That's just a fact. We're not going to argue over whether it's going to be, but sometimes you've heard referred to as the browning of America. There's a number of different ways people have referred to it. But that being said, it is simply a fact, and here's why it matters to us. So by 2020, the US is projected, which is right around the corner, to have 1.4 million high-tech jobs. And here's where the problem comes in, is that computer science programs, and not all high-tech jobs are filled with computer scientists, but computer science programs are projected to graduate about 400,000 students that are qualified by today's standards to fill those jobs. That means we have 1 million unmet jobs. And we know, again, in the political climate, if you start to talk about filling them from overseas, we get into kind of a sticky wicket because of immigration issues. But the reality is, whether you take them from overseas or whether you take them from inside the nation, we have a huge shortage. Put that together with the fact that the demographics of the population are shifting and we're not educating them. You can look at sort of that graph right there and realize that we are not educating the population at the same demographics for what we need, for what we know is sort of this looming crisis, is sort of how I refer to it. And if you look at the US, we've always been a country of innovation, but we've shifted. We sort of go where the innovation goes. And right now, high tech, and for the foreseeable future, I think in my lifetime, that will continue to be a huge innovative space, and we're going to get more techie and not less. You look at ubiquitous computing, wearable computing, all of the gaming, all of the things that are really commodity now, there's going to be more of that and not less. So if you look at sort of the space, this pie chart of, who the scientists and engineers are, and that was a 2013 graph, sadly, that doesn't look very different now. I mean, one of the things you learn when you get into this is shifting the needle is tough. It takes an investment, and it takes time. It takes money, time, and a lot of passion to be able to do it. But I work sort of on that, the upper right-hand side of that pie chart is trying to figure out what's going on. Because I could sit and wring my hands all day and say, it's a pipeline issue, right? Because I'm in higher ed, and if they don't come to higher ed, what can I do? Well, I can tell you what you can do. Because there's a lot of things that we can do, and it's not solely a pipeline issue, actually. And if you look at computer science, the STEM problem looks even more drastic. I was a computer scientist in the 80s, bachelor's, master's at Texas A&M. It was in an engineering college, which meant that I was a unicorn. So I was one of 3 girls. I'm still actually very much friends with them. We were kind of stuck together, but we were 3 out of a whole bunch of guys. And it does take a lot of resilience to get through a program where you are one of your kind, or you are one of 3 of your kind, where there are hundreds that are not like you at all. But if we look at sort of 71% of all new jobs are in computing, and we are only graduating 8% of STEM graduates are in computer science, right? So hopefully I've convinced you there's a problem here. And it's not just in this country either. So globally, we've got an issue. So Europe looks very much like the US does. So they have the same kinds of problems that we do. There have been concerted efforts in India and Brazil to actually bring people up, and we're seeing really good numbers. But again, that's with a concerted effort to bring more of the demographics in high tech to look more like the demographics in the population. And before somebody asks me, I've been asked many, many times, so if women make up 50/51% of the population, do you honestly expect 50 or 51% of high tech jobs to be filled by women? I don't know. I'm just trying to get past 20%, right? I know where we are is too low, and I know that if you look at sort of the racial and ethnic minorities, it gets grossly even lower than that. And really what I'm looking at is sort of who's gonna fill these jobs and who's gonna keep us competitive. So let's look at a few facts that, I'll give you the shock and awe here, and then we'll get into the good stuff. I'm not going to leave you with sort of doom and gloom. Women representation in STEM occupations has declined since the 1990s. It went up for a little while, so I graduated 83 timeframe. It went up for a little while, and then it declined again. Men are employed in STEM occupations at twice the rate of women, 31% versus 15%. Some of that is a perception issue. Some of that happens early on, like 3rd, 4th grade with our girls. Some of it is that even when we get them in, we lose them once they're there. Nearly 1 in 5 female STEM graduates leave the labor force. Less than 1 in 10 male STEM graduates do. There are a lot of theories and a lot of reasons why that is the case. You might think that actually women being sort of the ones that are typically considered caregivers, they have the children, that might be the leading reason, and in fact it's not. It's actually conditions in the workforce that drive them out, and it's them having to make a work and life balance sort of choice. If it's a choice between my kids and my family and my job, my kids and family are gonna win out every time. I don't think we should make them choose. In 2011, 6% of STEM workers were black. That's up from 2% in 1970. Hispanics were only 7% of the STEM workforce in 2011. And then you have this collection, Native Americans, Pacific Islanders, and indigenous peoples. They register less than a single digit in aggregate. 95% of corporate leaders believe that the culture of diversity and inclusion contribute to innovation. So organizational research says The more diverse your teams are, the more inclusive they are, the more creative they are. The more creative they are, the more money you're going to make. It really is just sort of a straight line from diversity and inclusion to the bottom line. For every 10% increase in racial and ethnic diversity on senior executive teams, earnings increase 0.8%. Companies in the top quartile for racial and ethnic diversity are 35% more likely to have financial returns. 86% female and 74% male millennials consider employers' policies on diversity, equity, and inclusion to be at the top. And the reason that's important is because that's our current and tomorrow's workforce. They really care about it. And in fact, that's part of how we get them into actually wanting to get a degree in STEM education and computer science. Transitioning from a single gender office to an office that's more evenly split, the estimates are that you can gain about 41% revenue increase. And a move from no female leaders to 30% representation is associated with a 15% increase in revenue. 15% of the world's population has some sort of disability, and that, when we talk about an inclusion and diversity, is almost never spoken about. We have worked with some kids with disabilities, and I'll talk a little bit about that with the Computing for Change. The combined buying power of LGBT community is $917 billion. So there really is an economic bottom line here. Ignoring inclusion and diversity in tech comes with a $16 billion price tag, and unfair treatment in the workplace is the single largest driver of turnover in tech. That contributes significantly to why we're losing them once we get them in. So what do we know about our future workforce? So sort of our current age group. Millennials get a bad rap. I mean, look, I've got a 23 and a 21-year-old. I want to smack them on a daily basis. I get it, right? I'm tired of watching them communicate through their phone. I don't understand it, but it is what it is. But here's the great things about millennials, and you may have read an article about it, and post-millennials. So they are considered sort of the Me Too generation, the me generation, but they are also very, very creative and very innovative. They don't have some of the baggage that my generation came along with, and they might just be one of the most innovative generations that we've seen for forever, right? So they may just have some of the solutions to the world's largest problems. So if we get past sort of the fact that they communicate in a weird way and they can be very antisocial and some of their thoughts are pretty out there, let's look at some of the other things. So they've grown up in an age of pervasive and oftentimes ubiquitous technology. So when my kids were 4 years old, and I grew up in tech, right? I have degrees, I have a PhD in tech. They were teaching me how to use the computer and the gaming devices, right? My kids are not special. Kids just know how to use technology. They're not scared about it. It is a part of their culture. But they've also grown up in an age of violence, right? They have known nothing. This age group now has known nothing but sort of this perpetuation. We've been in war. We've had lots of violence on the news. Whether or not you want to argue about that, we just talk about it more, it makes no difference. It's there and it's not going away, and these kids are really shaped by it. And they really want to make a difference in their communities. When you sit down and talk to these kids and really get their attention, they want to make a difference and they want to give back to their local communities. And they really want that work-life balance. They want to do something that makes a difference. If you ask them the single biggest thing that they want to do, I want to make a difference. And you might think it's a naive statement, everybody wants to make a difference, but they really do have a passion for doing something that will affect positive change. So how do we harness that? Because here's what they think high-tech person A looks like, right? Whenever you ask outside of sort of white guy, what a high-tech person looks like or a computer scientist looks like. It's this pasty guy sitting in this dark room coding all day. You and I know that that is actually not the case, but we have to deal with the perception. They don't actually think that that's really what it can look like. And there is an element to it that says if you can see it, you can be it. So placing leaders and role models and people in positions of authority that look like them is a strong influencer, but it's not enough. So before Perk, you guys know what the Perk Conference is, there was SC18, and I chaired SC18, and I had an opportunity to talk to the kids, the student programs, and Rosalia Gomez on the left and Linda Ackley from Sura, who's right next to her, they were in charge of student programs. It was the most diverse group of students I had ever seen. And I had an opportunity to sit down and talk to them, and I said, what's really on your mind? I have 3 opportunities to go talk to the audience. What do you want me to talk about? And I said, I really want to know what's on your mind. And I thought, perhaps it would be about school or sort of, all the rigors of getting a graduate degree or undergraduate degree. It wasn't. Had nothing to do with that. It was the social issues. It was then that I realized that the social issues and what's going on at home weigh much, much, much larger than their academic studies. And in fact, it influences oftentimes negatively what happens in their academic studies. And it was at that point that we had a little bit of magic going on. We went back and said, how do we, like any good engineer does, how do we reverse engineer this magic, put it into a program so that we can start to get students into this, what we already know is a leaky pipeline. Well, we came up with, and it was, it kind of coincided with some magic with John West being the chair of SC18. So you guys don't know it. Patrick Bridges is in the back. He's going to be after me. You guys are all 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon away from a Mississippi Mafia member. We didn't coin ourselves Mississippi Mafia, but we're all graduates from Mississippi State back in the early 90s, sort of late 90s. And there are a group of us that we've all kind of stuck together. But John was SC18 chair. I begged and pleaded, please allow me to co-locate this program. I think we've got something. And the something was, we know we can engage these kids and teach them the skills that they need by talking about things that they cared about. And at that time, it was very much about Black Lives Matter. We put together this group up here at the top, Ruby Mendenhall in the middle. She's at University of Illinois Champaign-Urbana. Sue Fracken, I'm sure you recognize her. Lizanne DeStefano, she's an external evaluator from Georgia Tech, worked with her on the Exceed project, and Lorna Rivera. And we put together sort of what would a curriculum look like if we were going to do informal learning, because we didn't have the opportunity and we wanted to start out small. If we were going to do informal learning, what would we do? Well, we know storytelling is very powerful, right? I'm Southern, and storytelling in the South, whether or not fabricated or exaggerated, is a big part of that culture. But it turns out storytelling is a part of a lot of cultures. It's not unique to where I came from. And it also kind of creates this emotional attachment to the material that kids are learning. We also know that visualization is a very, very, very powerful tool as well, because we actually only, what we remember 10% of what we hear, 65% of what we see, just by the way that our brain is made up. And I know that whether or not you consider yourself to be a visual learner, there are things that stick with you that you see. So why would I not work with that and leverage it rather than working against it? We also know that team science, very different from group projects. I hate group projects. I still hate them. I have a lot of animosity from my education early on because I was the one left holding the bag oftentimes. But I'm talking about team science, where everybody sort of comes together, contributes, does their part. It's really like the workforce, right? So when you go into the workforce, we get a lot of kids that have never done team projects. They're not particularly good team members. And you and I both know that I can teach them the skills that they need, but I can't teach them to be a good team member. And those soft skills can oftentimes be much more toxic to the workforce than anything else. So part of what we teach them is we teach them how to operate in a team. We teach them how to actually not get territorial, but realize that they're contributing a piece to the pie along with everyone else and respecting opinions and ideas. We also teach them discovery-based learning. So failure is okay. In our current educational system, K through 12 and in college, they do everything they can to avoid failure. Some of the best things I've done in my life, some of the things that have stuck with me, have been failures originally that I then learned from and actually turned it into a success. We should not shy away from allowing them to fail. I don't want to encourage them to fail repeatedly doing the same thing, but we should allow them the freedom to discover freely and help them actually scope it. So in SC18, we brought together this very diverse group of kids. So this is not what you see at SC, as you well know. Oftentimes, the community pulls from within its own sort of what they know, which means that it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. We go outside of that. We actually took applications for this, took in, I think it was 18 kids at that time, 60% female, 40% African American, 58% first-generation college students. I only had a single day with them. So and these kids, by the way, only one of them was a computer science kid. All the rest of them came from a bunch of different areas, nursing, psychiatry, all different things. So we took these kids, we taught them data analysis, we taught them visualization, and they did it in a day. And something again, magic happened. They actually asked if they could work on it longer. They asked to work all night on a problem because they were so interested in the topic of Black Lives Matter. And we didn't actually debate any of what we said. We said, go look at the data. Here are our ordained data sets. Let's talk about some integrity. Let's do some analysis, and let's see what the data says, because the data says what the data says. We taught them how not to misrepresent what the data says. From there, we also, so Lizanne and Lorna are external evaluators. We did, again, the second year, SC17, and talked about immigration, because at that time, immigration was a hot topic. We were a little cash poor, so we brought in kids from the local Denver area and took a look at immigration, what the policies were, all different things. So one thing I should say is that each of these kids is required to formulate their own individual hypothesis. They can work across groups or within groups, and they all have to speak to it publicly, and they all have to defend. This was a two-day challenge. In SC18, we actually expanded it again. So at that point, Computing for Change happened. So John approached me and SCHPC approached me and said, we think you've got something here, and we really don't like the way ACM, the Association for Computing Machinery, actually does their competitions. We want you guys to pick it up. So we did. So for SC18, they sponsored it, and the topic was violence. What we changed a little bit was we took international applications, we opened it up, we got roughly 250 applications for 16 spots. They came from 5 countries. There were 10 female, 1 non-binary, 2 with disabilities. We actually had a deaf competitor. That was more of a learning experience for us than anything else. We had a really diverse group of kids. We also brought in a native Hawaiian team to participate but not compete, because we added culture as an aspect to this, and respecting and infusing culture rather than shying away from it. How can we actually infuse cultural competency? The winning team actually worked on resisting cultural acceptance of violence. They talked about, and it was Native Hawaiian, a kid from Guam, a kid from China, and then another young lady who's at a U.S. institution. So all these kids were at U.S. institutions. They looked at domestic violence, they looked at gun violence, they looked at suicide in Guam. It's the #1 leading cause of death amongst males, but they were able to kind of run with it. Out of that, we had an NSF Includes Grant, so that Hawaiian team, I should say, somehow I've managed that. I've been to Hawaii double digits times, and I've never once paid for it myself. I'm not sure what kind, it was. I wish I could tell you it was my genius, but it's just sort of happened, and I'm gonna run with it as long as I can. But this Includes Grant is a flipped model to talk, to Native Hawaiian kids, Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders, teach them data science and visualization and computation. A lot of them care about environment, climate change, things that really affect the local Pacific Islands. That summer immersion experience will be May 15th to mid-June. And out of that, we have expanded to what we call the Pacific Alliance. That's the proposal we just finished yesterday, bringing in all of the small American territories and American Pacific Islands that are way out there that have issues like human trafficking, really, really horrendous issues, poverty like we don't see on the mainland, and trash, water quality, climate change, and do sort of the same thing, but bringing in also faculty and people working at the local state agencies, Department of Health, EPA, so that we can have people that have to do this for boots on the ground in the workforce. So in summary, it's not exclusively a pipeline program, and we can't just wring our hands. There's a lot that we can do to shift the needle, and I've seen that over the last 4 years or so. Attracting students into this field requires that we sort of look outside our norm, and it really requires that we get to know them a little bit and find out what's important to them. And there's far too little money. I've never had to work so hard for $299,000 in my entire life. I've gotten $8 million grants and not had to work as hard as I did for $299,000, which is really a shame. But that being said, on the flip side, to grow a successful program the way that we have, it has to have structure, it has to have rigor, and it has to have data behind it. You have to collect data and you have to do evaluation so that you can prove that what you're doing is really making a difference. And then really fundamentally, it's engaging the why. Why is this important? What am I talking about? What's the motivation? Before we talk about the mechanics of the how. That's really the key to everything that we do there. I would be remiss if I did not thank you for your time. My apologies for going a little bit over. At Perk 19, we will have an Advanced Computing for Social Change workshop that brings in not only students, but also faculty so that we can start to grow out this network. And then these are all of the people, without acknowledging and thanking them, I would be in deep trouble. So thank you very much for your time.
Any questions? Go.
So I think it's on. In all your metrics where you were looking at retention issues and the like, did you have one in there, maybe I missed it, of tracking people that leave because of promotion? My organization inside Boeing used to get beat up because they'd say, you don't have enough women. And then I'd say, well, now wait a minute. Let's talk about all the ones that everybody else stole because they got promoted and left the organization.
Yeah, I didn't have that in there. I don't have the statistics on that. Let me say up front, and I can speak from a female perspective, I certainly don't want a job because I'm a woman. Please don't ever give me a job because I'm a woman. Being a woman may open the door, but I want you to really want me to work there. So I've never really believed in having hard metrics that say, by 2021, we're going to have 40% women. How are you going to do that? I mean, there are so many issues involved in that. But there's a lot that you can do that makes it more inclusive and attractive. There is a lot of low-hanging things that can be done so that women are attracted to the positions. Some of it's a pipeline issue. I don't like people getting beat up because their current metrics don't look right. I would rather look at sort of what's behind all of it. Of course. Bring it on.
So in all of your studies, have you looked to see if there's a critical mass? And the reason why I ask this is I have groups that are primarily women,
Yeah.
computational.
Yeah.
And they seem to attract more. I have others that are just hardcore, Asian, white guy, computer science, and just never a woman goes there. And it's kind of like once you get a critical mass of certain number of folks, then it attracts people
Yes.
versus the other. So have you looked at that so much?
Yeah, we have, and I think unofficially, I think that what we're beginning to see, so we had 16, 17, 18, we're planning for 19, and we've got sort of this Native Hawaiian cohort. I think we are beginning to hit our stride. So what we do is, after the first year, we brought back 4 of them to be sort of near-peer mentors, and we keep up with these folks longitudinally. We know, one thing I can tell you, sort of this one and done thing never works. So persistence is something that is crucially important. And they will reach out. We have a LinkedIn where they can reach out. They email us all the time, casual questions. Maybe they have a bigger question. We bring them back in for things that are happening larger at TACC. We make introductions. I think so with sort of 80 to 100 kids now that we have, I think we are hitting sort of a critical mass where they know each other and things are beginning to look different. I think that's why you see us shifting, because there's only so much of my time and there's only so much of the other 5 folks that you saw there. There's only so much that we can do individually until we get this sort of in the higher ed is where we're starting, until we get this model that makes it attractive for people to come in and teach their courses this way. It's probably always going to be very informal. So at Perk 19, that's why we're bringing faculty in, because we know it's time to start to grow the onion out. You know what I mean? But I think for us, 100 has been sort of where we've seen the tipping point. That's not to suggest that any one group you need 100 of the same kind of thing. That's because these kids aren't the same, and there are white kids, there are females, there are Asian kids, there are, it runs the gamut. It's just that it looks diverse. Nothing stands out as being, overwhelmingly the larger group. Does that make sense?
Over here. So I, in addition to being at Sandy, I teach part-time at St. John's University in Minnesota. And one of the things I've seen over the years is that this misperception of what it means to be a computer scientist is really impactful.
Yes.
And we see it in that the people who want to write games sign up for computer science, find out that's not really what computer science is about. They drop out. And then all the people who think that's what it's about and don't want to be a part of that don't ever show up. And one of the things that's happening now is we're introducing computer science into the high school curriculum. And so we're seeing, we're going to double the number of computer science majors in the next few years because we're getting people who know now better what computer science is all about. I think this image perception, and we see it in TV shows all the time, right?
All the time.
It's just terrible. It's just terrible.
I know, and where pixels just sort of disappear, I can't watch it.
Yeah. And to me, I don't know. Maybe I'm sure there are other strong things we can do, but that is one really big thing.
It
is
is.
Expose our kids at a very young age as to what the field is really about.
Yeah, and I can only speak sort of from my personal perspective because I came through when it was very tough. So I've been asked a lot, like, how did you make it? One, I had a strong parent that was in education that told me I could be anything I wanted to be. Right, literally. He told me, you can do anything you want to do, be anything you want to be, that's up to you. I cannot overemphasize how important the familial component is to kids going into certain majors. That being said, I think where we've seen a bit of a shift is rather than emphasizing sort of, yes, learn how to program, yes, let's do some hackathons, we actually do it by topic. Because I know and you know there are a million topics people care about that require computer science, data science, whatever piece of it you want to focus on. That's what we focus on is, hey, what are you interested in? Okay, well, here's how computer science and data science really fit into this, and we shift the conversation. And I think if it were taught more like that, I can tell you personally, because I'm teaching my son calculus too, that's what we do. If I had been taught math that way, I'd have a much stronger math background, for sure.
Hi. Oh, that's loud. Welcome to Santa Fe. I run an organization here called STEM Santa Fe, and we do programs we provide informal learning and hands-on project-based programs for kids. We start at 5th grade.
Yeah.
Especially with girls, because if we don't catch these girls early by middle school, they've lost interest. If they're slightly interested in math and science, they lose it. There's peer pressure, there's all kinds of boys and driving, and I don't know. Anyway, one of the successes that we've had is that we use professionals as role models and mentors. We focus a lot on mentorship. Our mentors range from giving workshops, 2-hour workshop once a year. You know, we have a conference for girls, and we bring every woman in STEM that we know in this local community to come in and do a hands-on workshop and be role models to the girls. But we also have mentors who come once a week to a school and mentor for an hour and a half over an 8-week period. So if you have 1 day a year, or if you have 1 hour a week, we can always use you anywhere in your community. And the other thing, though, it's very hard to do longitudinal studies when we don't have the money and the grants for that. It's very hard to do it, to measure impact of persistence and teamwork with kids. When, you know, how we haven't been able to figure that piece out, is how to measure our impact of our programs, that, yeah, we are contributing, we are moving the needle, when you can't really track kids.
That's right.
Underage kids.
That's right.
So this is the thing. The other thing that we face as a challenge is sports. Sports culture is unbelievable. You know, I mean, I have parents who are scientists and computer scientists from Los Alamos Lab, and their daughter, they couldn't wait till their daughter get into my program when she got into 5th grade. The Saturday that I had a conference for those girls, for 200 girls, there was soccer practice.
Yeah.
And the parents decided that soccer practice was more important than coming to our STEM conference for girls. I don't understand it. Do you have any answer to that? We fight the culture of sports all the time. We even fight it with principals in schools who will send buses for kids to go to a basketball game to cheer the school basketball team rather than sending a robotics team, finding a bus for a robotics team. You know, but thank you.
Yeah, and I will, so let me echo something that you said and sort of add to it. So I had sort of a little mental breakdown fit during an NSF review because I was asked, we were being reviewed on the Exceed project, and they loved what we did, but they didn't want to give any more money, but they wanted me to replicate this. They wanted thousands of kids, like thousands, and I'm struggling with sort of 20 at a time. And so I had a little bit of a mental breakdown and a fit, and I said, either NSF is going to play serious and put serious money behind it, or you need to get out of the game, because you're just giving it lip service at this point. And what I've seen people do, so for the industry folks out here, whether it's our program or whether it's her programs, I can't tell you how critical it is for industry to support this, because you may think that the federal agencies actually support it, and they really, really don't. Not at a level that will actually ever move the needle. And they want you to say that I can solve Native Hawaiians, you know, who register in the point-something%. Kelly, in 4 years, can you say that you've gotten the needle up to 10%? No, I can't say that. And it's a ridiculous question. It's the wrong question. But I cannot tell you how important it is for funding for just the kinds of things that she talked about, for us to be able to prove that we're having an impact. And I believe in that. It costs money. And longitudinal studies cost money. And with her underage kids, there's a privacy issue that you've got to get over, which costs even more money. So one of the things that you guys could do is sort of pick your favorite program and really invest in it in a serious way. That will help move the needle. I've tried to advocate for all of us, actually. It's shocking because I'm a computer scientist. I've written grants. It was easier for me to get $8 million than it was $299,000. And I had to write and rewrite and rewrite. And I probably spent $299,000 of my personal time trying to get $299,000. It's a little ridiculous right now.